Welcome to the Rye Free Reading Room. My name is Chris Shoemaker. I am the director here, and I am so excited to see all of you out here tonight as we celebrate another wonderful year of 5 Towns, 1 Book. It's a privilege to work with Cure and bring people together for inspiring conversations that inform and change our lives. So thank you for joining us here at the Rye Free Reading Room tonight. It is my privilege to introduce Pam Bradman and Nicole Alafante from Cure, who will be taking over and running the show. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I'm Nicole Alafante from Cure. We're the Coalition for Understanding Racism Through Education. We were founded in about 2018. We are in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, but we've had the great honor of making lots of relationships throughout the county at this point. And so we're grateful to be here. The Westchester County Board of Legislatures funds this particular event. And we want to shout out to Catherine Parker, and we want to shout out to the Lorraine Hansberry Coalition, who really inspired this. I met Linda Jones through the Westchester Women's Agenda, and she told me about the coalition she founded in Croton, where Lorraine lived and died at a very young age. And so I thought, at some point, Cure and Lorraine Hansberry Coalition are going to come together, and we did. So this whole event is based on Radical Vision by Suika Diggs Colbert, who is a professor at Georgetown, and she wrote this piece about Lorraine Hansberry's life. And so these events are built around that book and the work and the life and the intersectionality of Miss Hansberry. So we're going to read the bios of these incredible people. I had the honor of seeing Baldwin versus Buckley at Cambridge at the Public Theater with my husband, and when I got up from the seat, I said, what if we can get these amazing people up to Westchester? And I'm like I'm shaking right now. So here they are. And our moderators tonight are going to be Pam from Cure, who holds up the whole fort, and Reverend Lane Cobb, who I met, I don't even know how we met, but Race Talk Revolution was and is your platform. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? No. Okay. It's a beautiful platform for conversations about race, a very calling in platform. So our amazing guests. Would you want to
Sure, I'm going to introduce John Collins, who founded the elevator repair service in 1991. Since then, he's directed or co-directed all of the company's productions, while also serving as the company's artistic director. ERS productions directed by him include Cab Legs, Room Tone, Gats, The Select, or The Sun Also Rises, The Sound and the Fury, Arguendo, Measure for Measure, and numerous others. He is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a United States Artists Fellowship, and a Doris Duke Performing Artist Award. Welcome, John.
And then we have Mr. Greg Sargent, who is one of the conceivers of James Baldwin, and Buckley at Cambridge. He played James Baldwin in the production. He is an actor, associated artist of the Obie Award-winning Target Margin Theater and a company member of the internationally renowned Obie Award-winning theater ensemble Elevator Repair Service. Recent credits include Baldwin and Buckley, Measure for Measure, and The Sound and the Fury at the Public Theater, Parable Conference at Brooklyn Academy of Music, along with Fondly, Colette Richland, Bonnie Splate. He's worked at New York Theater Workshop. He's worked at the Baryshnikov Arts Ensemble. He's done plays like Uncle Vanya, The Dinner Party, The Seagull. I mean, this man is unbelievable. Many with Target Margin Theater, and films include, let's see, Help Me Mary and The Bad Infinity. And Mr. Sargent has also been published in American Theater Magazine, having written an article regarding agency and race in the theater. Greg was a W.E.B. Du Bois Fellow at West Virginia University, where he received his MFA in acting.
And April Mathis.
Lorraine plays Lorraine Hansberry in Baldwin and Buckley at Cambridge. She is an Obie Award-winning actor and company member of Elevator Repair Service. with Elevator Repair Service. She has appeared in Baldwin and Buckley at Cambridge and the Philadelphia Fringe Festival. Pardon me, I'm sorry. The Sound and the Fury, Fondly, Colette Richland, Measure for Measure at the Public, Everyone's Fine with Virginia Woolf at the Abrams Arts Center, GATS at the Perth Festival, Broadway, August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, Off-Broadway, Help, The Shed, Tony Stone at the Roundabout, Fairview, Lear with Soho Rep, Signature Plays, Funny House of a Negro at Signature Theater, Iowa, Antilia Pneumatica, Playwrights Horizons, wow. On the Levee, Regional, Most Happy in Concert, Little Bunny Foo Foo, Actors Theater of Louisville, A Streetcar Named Desire at Yale Rep. Television, credits include The Blacklist, Evil, The Good Fight, New Amsterdam, and film credits include Black Card, Fugitive Dreams, and Ramona at Midlife. Welcome, April Mathis. Wow. So thank you, first of all, Nicole, for inviting me to be a part of this event. You know, I'm in awe of your events, so thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. And looking forward to hearing from you guys. Can you each tell us a little bit about yourselves, maybe something that's not on the, on the bio? How have you come to have careers in the performing arts, and how did you end up in elevator repair service? Yeah, Greg, please start.
I am the son of immigrants. My parents are from Guyana, South America, and they moved to the United States for a better life. And I was born in Brooklyn, and my parents were very gung-ho about getting the best education they could for their children, so we moved to an all-white town in Long Island, where I quickly learned that things were different for me than the people around me, and I didn't like that. And I started acting out in terrible ways, and my parents were very, very worried about me. And quite by accident, I found the theater, which sort of saved my life. It gave me a voice. I realized people could sit in a theater for 2 hours to listen to a point of view, and I wasn't going to get interrupted. And once I had a first taste of that, I knew I wanted to devote my life to the theater. And that's something that's not in the program, about me and how I started in this business and how I continue to try to use my art now for positive force in the world.
I can't top that. I got into theater as a kid, like a lot of people do. You know, eventually figured out that I had to do it as a career, even though I tried to convince myself that I should be a lawyer or something, anything else other than a theater person, because I'd be better off, and I would have been in a lot of ways. But I stuck with it, came to New York right out of college, started trying to make shows with the people I knew and trusted. And that was about being a shy person, I think, or a not very ambitious person. But it led to the creation of a theater company, and you know, in a long history now. But basically, I learned how to make work by gathering great people around me, people like these two people. And I have been the beneficiary of a lot of great work by a lot of wonderfully talented people like Greg and April for 30 years now. But it's what I love. I love the collaborative and social part of being a theater company. I love that being in the theater forces you always to collaborate and talk and compromise and work with people who are not you. And I continue to learn a tremendous amount every time I make a show with a group of smart, talented people that I'm very lucky to work with. So that's what keeps me going.
I'm originally from Texarkana, Texas. So to find myself as a working actor in New York City is just as surprising to me as to anyone I went to school with. But I went to UT undergrad as an English major, and that campus, it's a 40-acre campus, and the liberal arts department is on one end, and the performing arts department is on the completely opposite end. And they said that was by design to keep us from organizing and like coming together. And there's like a big engineering and business departments, which that school is known for, right in the middle. So I started doing community theater in Austin, Texas, after going to school as an English major. And I always thought I'd be a writer, but there was something about, like John was saying, collaborating with people that got me to produce in a way that sitting alone in front of my computer, you know, like you can't hear all the people waiting for you to write the great American novel the way that you have an audience waiting to watch you perform and a company waiting for you to show up. You know, I always feel like you can't die when you're in a show because that would just be highly unusual. That's like a thing that would be really strange for that to happen to that theater company. So like you feel kind of essential in a way that performing with a group of people makes you feel. And so I moved from Austin to New York and started doing downtown theater. And a lighting designer of a show that I had worked on recommended me to John. And we kind of talk about it in Baldwin, Buckley, Cambridge, how Greg and I came to Elevator Repair Service, but it was a production of The Sound and the Fury. And we were asked to come in on that production. And so that was my introduction to Elevator Repair Service. And, you know, being someone who wasn't trained as an actor, never went to acting school, never took anything more than like an on-camera class here and there. When I got to ERS, it reminded me so much of like my own play that I did as a child, like imaginative play. It was just like I was handed a copy of The Sound and the Fury and told to like be verse right now and just start reading. And so, you know, I was like, okay, well, have a couple different Southern accents. Like, I'll just keep trying those. And like, you know,
They worked.
this is a baby, this is a horse carriage, this is a bed. And, you know, we were just making elements as we found them. And the untrained, like person who has a sense of play kind of took to that in a way that like really jibed with what ERS does. And I didn't know that. I hadn't seen any Elevator Repair Service shows, but that it just made a lot of sense. And it was also the funniest, smartest room I was in. Like, I don't even know how much of the text we actually got through because most of the rehearsal was just inside jokes. Inside jokes that made me laugh, though, because I felt like I knew it there. And one person was just laughing so much at one point, she said, self-nip. Like, nip it in the bud. Like, but that was just kind of like this, like, no, that was Tori.
Oh, right.
Like, just like, I remember that first rehearsal and everybody just seemed like they were out of Saturday Night Live, like in the 70s. Like, they just all seemed like genius, like humorous, like the smartest and the dumbest room I was in. And I was like, you know, I found my people.
So let's chat about the production of Baldwin versus Buckley at Cambridge. And Greg, I know this is personal. This was a personal thing for you. Can you tell us first the historical premise of the debate and its topic, and then why and how the company chose to reenact it?
Sure. Okay, so when the debate happened in February of 1965. In January of 1965, the paperback edition of James Baldwin, Another Country, was being published in England. And the publisher of that publishing company wanted to fly James Baldwin from Nice to London to do publicity for the book. And he came up with this brilliant idea to try to get as much press out there as possible. So he set up all of these interviews. He also decided that he was going to call Cambridge University to see if they would host him to talk about the book. When the publisher spoke to James Baldwin about the book, they refused to just have him come there to promote the book. But they did like the idea of having him participate in a debate with a conservative, but they weren't sure who they were going to get. At first, they wanted Strom Thurmond, but they couldn't get Strom Thurmond to debate him. Then they wanted Barry Goldwater, and Barry Goldwater wasn't interested. But somebody on Barry Goldwater's team was very gung-ho about this new conservative, William F. Buckley, who was skiing in Gstaad, Switzerland at the time with his good friend James Mason. So the publisher called William F. Buckley to see if he would come to Cambridge to debate Baldwin, and he said yes. So when all was decided, they decided that they were going to propose a question to debate on, and that question was, the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. So that's the historical aspect of the debate. The personal part and how we chose to do this was that Elevator Repair Service was working on another production, The Seagull. And John very graciously asked me to be in The Seagull, and he wanted me to play a particular role. And it's a great role, but I never saw myself playing this particular role. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And for the first time in my career, I said to John, you know what, John? I think this person would be better in that role than me. I've never said that before. And John was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. And John was like, well, what would you like to do? And I said, well, what would I like to do about what? I said, well, what would you like to do? And I was like, sorry, John, I don't really understand the question. He goes, Greg, if you had to do something with Elevator Repair Service, what would it be? And I was like, oh my gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. So I knew in the back of my mind that at some point I wanted to play James Baldwin. My dear friend's father years ago came up to me and said, you know, you should play James Baldwin one day. And that always stuck with me because, you know, I had read Baldwin in college, and it was so interesting to me. He was so interesting to me, and he was a role model in every way. And so I went home and I watched YouTube, and I watched every interview and movie, documentary, and quite by accident, I came about the debate, and I didn't know about the debate before, and I watched the entire debate, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, this could be happening right now. Fundamentally, things haven't changed since 1965. This could be very theatrical. And then I said to myself, I'm going to have a meeting with John. So I went ahead and discussed the meeting with John. We found the transcript. We arranged to have a meeting of the transcript. We were all on the same page, and we decided that we were going to try to make this a go. John said, you know, there's that conference that happens every January. It's called the APAP Conference, where theater producers from all over the world come to New York to see shows, to see what they're going to bring back to the theater. So John said, I'm going to rent a theater. I'm going to send an email. We're going to do 2 performances, and we'll just see what happens. I'm like, John, we haven't even had a rehearsal yet. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So
We'll just read it.
we'll just read it. So to make a long story very short, we had the 2 performances. They were a huge success. And from those 2 performances, we got like 5 offers, I think, to do the show.
few at least.
A few at least. And so we were well on our way. I mean, if I had planned this to be greenlit at some point, it would have never have happened. I don't know how this happened. All the stars were aligned. And so we were all set and we were working on it, and then COVID happened. And by the time COVID happened, we already had a firm date in May of 2020 to perform at the public. So, of course, that show was canceled along with so many other shows. But we persevered and we kept going, and we're reaping the fruit off the trees from that now. So
I have one quick question. Do you know, is it documented what Baldwin's reaction was to, hey, we don't want to interview about your book. We want you to debate this conservative. Like, how did he feel about that?
When we were doing the research, we found out that the book about the debate had just come out. It was about Baldwin and Buckley and the debate. That's where we found the transcript. Okay. I think that Baldwin was very sort of like gung-ho.
Oh, okay.
He was not like frightened off by that.
Good. Okay.
At all. So.
And he was a bit of a celebrity already then.
Yeah.
And in Europe especially, I think. So it was really Buckley who was kind of set up to fail in that debate.
Okay, right, and James won.
And I think
right?
Baldwin was the reason that there were 700 people packed into the Cambridge Union for that debate. Like the BBC film of it is amazing to watch because there's not a square inch of floor in that room that's left.
Yeah.
They packed people in. They were sitting on the floor. They were you know, up the walls. They were everywhere. And I think it was mostly because Baldwin was such an exciting personality already then for people.
I'm also curious, just a show of hands, like how many audience members knew of that debate? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, because I didn't, and when I watched it, I was like, where was this all my life? Like, there's so many things, you know, about you know. Anyway, okay. Sorry. So, oh yeah. So April, in the final scene of this piece, so this was the transcript was the debate basically. That was the play. But then I didn't expect to find you as Lorraine Hansberry, just showing up after in your, I guess, room, your parlor or wherever, with James Baldwin. So and then you have this conversation and then you morph into yourselves. So you go from James and Lorraine to Greg and April. So my question is, why that scene? How did you write it? And then why did you morph into yourselves?
Well, when they were talking about the first iteration of this, that was this couple performances, huge success at APAP, and all these people were interested in it. That was before this moment. And I was one of these people that was like, wait, you're doing what? What? That there was going to be a piece with elevator repair service built around Greg, and that was like primarily dealing with like this Black artist. I was like, well, you know who James was friends with? Lorraine Hansberry, just saying. Maybe there's an opportunity there. And I just kind of insinuated myself into the project, being like, you can't keep this from me. I will be in the room. I will be a consultant. I will be present. And so, the day we found out that Tom Hanks had contracted COVID in Australia or New Zealand or wherever he was, and it was like, this is a thing, this coronavirus. We were all sitting together in Greg's apartment reading through it and thinking of bringing on like the other people to be involved to play the moderators. And through the course of like the pandemic and like touching this again, I had kind of thrown out, kind of half joking about Lorraine Hansberry, but I think
Good idea.
you took me up on it, because what they were wanting to do was, the way the debate ends historically is Buckley gets the last word, and then they come together and they decide, they tally the votes, and James wins hands down. But John didn't want to end the piece with the words of William F. Buckley ringing in the audience's ears. So he was trying to conceive of a way that we could stay with James Baldwin. And so I had thrown out the idea of like, you know, there's something, this is a great showcase for this actor. Like you heard the resume, like this is a veteran actor of the New York downtown theater scene. And I was like, can we just have a moment to lift up Greg Sargent? Like, let's just have a moment to look at him on stage. And so kind of spitballing off that idea to like have a moment of James Baldwin, the man in repose, like he's a celebrity. Who is he when he's, you know, off the court, so to speak? Who, you know, he's this, you know, legend in American intellectual thought. Who is he when he's by himself? And so that became, maybe he's thinking about, we also found out that Lorraine Hansberry had died earlier that year.
A month before the actual debate.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this moment was like a memory of the times where they used to spend time together, you know, and would like drink each other under the table and gossip. And, you know, Greg and I have been friends since we met working on The Sound and the Fury with Elevator Repair Service. So the idea of morphing in and out was like, not to compare ourselves with like Lorraine Hansberry and James Baldwin, but I mean,
because
Yeah, no.
we did what they did.
yes, but
We do what they
yes. Well, and I feel like they would love us. But the idea was, you know, how can we have this this relationship and get more of like James the human, and by extension Lorraine the human, and so that was kind of how we got to the device of having the kind of coda epilogue. And you know what's great about ERS is that we don't have to have and now we're going to explain to you that we're going into James's mind. It's just kind of like it can be it can be out of time. It doesn't have to be that I'm a ghost or whatever, you know, like it can just exist on its own. And at one point there was a thought that maybe it would end with us having a dance party and getting up, you know. But at one point, we had a lot of different ideas for the text of that, and sometimes the improv would be like you and I just kind of doing some theater gossiping, and what it turned into was kind of folding in. What'd you say?
Almost a lawsuit.
Yeah, well, we kind of got out of that into like actually, you know, talking about ourselves and kind of like calling in Elevator Repair Service for like the origin story of our involvement is Elevator Repair Service at that point existing as an all-white theater company and doing The Sound and the Fury with no black people involved, and then being like, oh, well, it's kind of problematic. And then, you know, like calling in some folks who were black and us being two of them. And we transparently talk about that as ourselves in that part of the show. And so that's us kind of folding out and then folding back in to where we start using language taken from different interviews and speeches that Lorraine and Jimmy gave that could also, is it us talking at that point, or is it Jimmy and Lorraine talking? Because it could be the same conversation.
It was so satisfying for me, and I felt like I was the, you know, maybe undeserving beneficiary of the fact that I had these two people in the room working out we were trying to solve a problem basically of like, how do we end this show that if we just do the transcript of the debate and we don't rearrange it, which we thought about doing, but it just didn't work, we can't end it with Buckley's words, you know, and his last words are a little scary. They're almost like a call for a race war or something. It's intense, and I did not want the audience leaving the theater with that in their heads, like April said. But to have the two of them, and it didn't take us that long, really. I mean, you had like 2 or 3 days to work this out. I remember when we were first working on it, and they found something that did what I couldn't have thought of on my own, but that still satisfied something I really wanted for the show, which was that it felt right now. It felt immediate, it felt real. You know, the text of the 1965 debate, we all thought was text that needed to be heard right now.
Yep.
And this was in 2019. And then as the next few years passed, that only got more urgent. But they found a way to bring themselves to it, which was a way of bringing the whole play to whatever day and time we were doing it. And to yank it right out of 1965, which is, you know, even though that's where it comes from, I wanted it to live in 2021, 2022, 2023, and they very organically found this moment of, you know, linking it all back to how they came to ERS and calling us out in that way, and which felt, you know, was humbling, obviously.
It was a radical move.
Yeah.
But it also felt so right.
It felt right.
It felt like we should not be doing this with no self-consciousness. We should not be you know, I, as the white guy directing it, should not be, you know, it should not get to cruise through in some righteous way without some acknowledgement of who else is involved with this, what company is doing this, and that felt right. It didn't always feel good, but it felt right.
Well, it was funny because, you know, like we were just in rehearsal and somehow we found our way to that conversation. I was like, you know, this is really, I kind of wish we would just say this. And that's what happened. So it was great.
Yeah, it was really, watching it was refreshing. Lane.
You know, well, what I'm present to so much in listening to Salika Diggs Colbert's book and going back and looking at the original debate, the courage and the resilience of those two people in particular, but our civil rights icons in general, and just what it must have taken to be those two people. And so I'm wondering what it was like for you two to portray those people, but also that Salika Diggs Colbert talks about Lorraine Hansberry using her writing and her plays as a witness to the lived experience of African Americans. And I'm wondering what you felt about that and the significance of having so many of her plays right now in revival. Like, why is her work so still important? Was it like for you, and why is that work so important still today?
Okay. Well, I mean, to answer the first part of your question, when we first started working on this, James Baldwin gave his last interview to a man named Quincy Troop. Quincy Troop was the biographer for Miles Davis. And he wrote the last interview a month before Baldwin died. And so we decided that we were going to meet with Quincy Troop to ask him questions about James Baldwin. And one of the things he said about James Baldwin is, even though that he was 5'6" and 130 pounds, he was one of the meanest, toughest motherfuckers you ever met. Excuse me. That's a quote. And I really sort of hung on to that the whole time because, I mean, basically, his whole life, he stuck by his principles and his beliefs and was totally unafraid And I learned from that so much as a human being, as an actor, as a performer, as a, budding activist, that strength that he had, that willing to do what other people weren't willing, they couldn't do it, and moving forward.
Unapologetic.
Unapologetic. In terms of witness, you need to have people see this in this time, for the confirmation of what you're trying to do, to keep going. It's, for me, that was a strong thing.
I mean, when I read Baldwin and Lorraine Hansberry and listen to the interviews, there's an intelligence that's just so clear. It's like none of this is really a mystery, and none of it is new. And one of the favorite things I loved from an exchange that they had that I was like, this has to be in here. It's like, what makes you think that I would want to be integrated into this? Meaning like American society writ large, maybe something else. It's like, what's that quote about, why would I want to be invited into a burning house? What's the expression about the burning house?
Yes.
But yes. And there's just something, I think, I forget who I was talking about this with, but it's also not new. This idea of like, am I crazy or did that just happen? It's like, I'm not crazy. And to me, that's what the witnessing is. It's like, let's call this out. Let's recognize this. Let's not say that this is all in my mind. Like, being from where I'm from, Texarkana, there's, growing up in my family, there was always like, okay, is this shop owner an asshole or are they racist? They're probably racist, but it's very interesting that in this country, people are still trying to not talk about slavery and take it out of the textbooks and take it out of the discourse and act like the ground we're sitting on isn't stolen. So to me, witnessing is all about naming things, telling the truth about things, talking about race and blackness and whiteness very openly and clearly. And that's the thing. It's just, I think intelligence is not just about, are we all familiar with this canon of literature, but it's a kind of social intelligence about, are we all seeing the same thing and can we name it?
I just wanted, that word crazy, like, I think that the so much of the crux of all this to me, because I started my journey in this with like reading Ta-Nehisi Coates and like our current thinkers, thought leaders in the Black community. And then I went back and read Baldwin, which I'd never read before. And I was like, but he was saying it already, like, idiot. I mean, I'm sorry, but so I think that word crazy just, it resonates with me all the time, because it's like, we have yet to say and talk about what we need to talk about. And you say Buckley ended with a call for a race war, but we could turn on the news right now and see that.
Yeah.
We can read an article in anything that's on the internet and there's a call for a race war. And that is like, we just can't cop to it. And it's not about like, let's line everybody up and blame them. It's like, let's heal this already, And I think that's like why this play, this reenactment, and then you sitting there on that sofa together is like, and here we are, and here we are. And so I just want to, can we get to the radical question? I think that might be your question, but I could say
Which one
her
was the
all night.
radical?
Her quote?
Well, her quote, right? And I
Oh, yeah, that's about, yeah.
right. I love that came up. That
About, how she says to Jimmy at the
About
end
white liberals.
about white liberals
Mhm.
becoming radicals.
what does that
which-
mean? What
It's
does
the
that
last
mean?
line of the play.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean to all of you individually? What does a white liberal becoming a radical mean? Because radical is such a scary word.
You know, well,
It's not,
white
but-
liberal is a scary word as well. I mean, it's all good to be well-meaning, but it's sort of like, I think in the book, she puts it like it's a cruel optimism, because the white liberal and the racist are drawn from the same piece of material. So they understand each other. The difference between the two of them is consciousness and education. One is more conscious and more educated, and one is more sympathetic than the other. But they're still the same. We need somebody who is going to fight the fight, who's going to take the action in spite of the consequences. And, I made a joke a little earlier, like that little ending scene to me is a very radical move. When we talk about how we started in this theater company, we were dealing with the most extraordinary white liberals there were. But just the fact that the act of having this scene was the white liberals became white radicals in that particular moment, because they called themselves out and shared it with other people. And by doing that, it continued the conversation, which was our hope for this piece. We brought this piece to a whole new audience to continue the conversation for hope in the future. So,
I think that's a fascinating and righteously provocative argument about the white liberals and the white racists being cut from the same cloth. And the way that one way that I understand that, and the way that I understand Hansberry's, call, is that because white people have such a hard time, and will always have a hard time, understanding the depths of their privilege, understanding what that really means, and how many tiny corners of their lives it affects. So that whether it's 1965 or right now, you cannot, there is a depth of investigation and questioning that will, whatever you can achieve in your life that way is never going to be enough. What resonates with me about that comparison, although startling as it is, it's about these, whether it's the educated and conscious white liberal or the uneducated and not conscious white racist, and sometimes there are educated and conscious white racists too, obviously. Maybe in some ways the even bigger problem. They're always dealing with their own comfort, right? And I think and the way I understand what Hansberry says there is that, and relate to, is that the white liberal has found a kind of comfort, has found a way to deal with that consciousness and that education and be comfortable and find, just the right threshold for that comfort. And for the white liberal, it's like saying the right thing, showing up in the right way, but it's not enough. And in fact, it can be corrosive in that way because of that kind of comfort that can come from being a good white liberal. And so, I think that, I think about that every time I hear it, it's meaningful to me that it is the last thing that we say in that show, because it's forward-looking, and it's maybe a subtle way of suggesting that we don't feel necessarily forgiven or comfortable for having done this show. I mean, I did it I did it for Greg, and I did it, you know, and I was happy to let him take the lead on this, and likewise with that final scene, to let these two great artists take the lead on that. But there will never be enough that an individual can do. So in some ways, radicalism is the only feasible option that way. And there are a whole bunch of different ways to understand that. But maybe most importantly is to understand that your comfort is not enough. You know, finding, you know, a comfortable, you know, gratifying, you know, righteousness about your opinions is not enough. And if you can't do anything else, you at least have to know that.
Well, radicalism is disruptive, and it's going to shake the foundations of our founding fathers and everything that we've been made to believe about these United States. And it's uncomfortable for everyone who grows up and is indoctrinated in this white supremacist version of what this country is and is built on. And it's gonna be uncomfortable. It's gonna be messy, and we're gonna have to divorce ourselves and disabuse ourselves of a lot of things. And there are folks who don't want that. And there are like white liberals who say, only so much, okay? Okay, guys, just wait. Or, you know, not this way, you know, or it has to look like this, or, you know, but really, I still want my kids to go to this kind of school, you know, like, and it takes not only getting rid of comfort, but like flipping over some tables and like, you know, putting yourself like John Brown on the line for some folks to be like, this is my problem. I'm gonna really take this on. Yeah, it's not comfortable.
But also, you know, there's so much, if we stop and think for a minute about what we were talking about, the courage of Lorraine Hansberry and James Baldwin, if you could even begin to conceive of what that courage really was, like what that really meant, like no, you know, comfortable, educated, liberal white person should have anything to fear about being a radical if these two could so fearlessly do what they did. You know, I mean, that courage should be inspiring to everyone, I think.
I think about when they were meeting, what was it, LBJ?
Yeah.
And, you know, they have this meeting, and...
Robert Kennedy.
Oh, no, it was Kennedy, yeah.
Right.
And there is a young activist from, like, the South, and, you know, Kennedy has gathered all these, like, Black intellectuals to talk, and Lorraine was like, you need to be talking to him. That's who I'm listening to. Like, this young guy who just came from whatever protest, like, that's who I'm taking my marching orders from. And that's what she was doing even when she was sick at the end of her life. That's, you know, I'm finding that with my Gen Z children, siblings, who are like making me, you know, who grew up in the 90s with Benetton and like Cosby Show. They're making me go like, I gotta sit with myself. I gotta, all right. Yeah, I got some stuff in me that I need to get rid of. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it almost is time to take questions. Gabby's like, if I move to the back of the room, it means it's time to take questions. I just want to make sure before we do, that we're not missing something. I mean, you have said so much more than we could have actually ever hoped for, so I think we're okay. Is there a burning question that any of us want to read off of our script, or should we move to our amazing people who showed up tonight?
I think we should move to the
The amazing people who showed up tonight. Okay. Anyone have questions for these incredible folks?
You know I do.
Yes, yes.
He's not a plant. He's not a plant.
No, you have to. Yeah, you do. You do, Shane. Thank you.
Well, this has been excellent, and thank you guys for just everything that you've done leading up to this. Your discussion of the white liberal and the quote reminds me of what Martin Luther King said about his concern about the white moderate, which is very similar to what you said, you know, wait another day, just one more day, just one more. And he's like, no, the moment is today. So my question for you guys, for all three of you is, what is a quote that they had when you listened to their discussions? What's something that resonated with you? What's something that you turn over every once in a while, like, oh my God, that might change the way I do something. That might change the way I act or think of something. The way that you said even your Gen Zs have you questioning, like, oh yeah, what exactly was my role in that? So what's a good quote that really stuck with you? A one-liner, a soundbite, anything like that? No, another. Please.
Well, I mean, in my particular speech as James Baldwin, I mean, it's filled with so many things. Yeah. But you know, there's the famous line, you know, I picked the cotton and I carried it to market. And I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. And every time I hear that line, and every time I say that line, and I feel the anger that boils up inside of me. And trying to really sit with myself and ask myself, how can I move on from this in a productive way? How can I talk to the people and teach the people so that this feeling of worthlessness subsides in some way for the future? So that's my one line.
Well, the whole thing about what makes you think I would want to be invited or indoctrinated or accepted into this, accepted. It's, you know, I think of like the whole thing of you gain what profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul. It's about, it makes me question the pursuit of capitalism and, you know, commercial success as an actor. It makes me question the American dream and like what kinds of roles and jobs I want to get and to what end. You know, it's like the Oscars are coming up. Everybody wants an Oscar. Everybody wants to, you know, and then what? Exactly. To have the house and do what? Exactly. When there's so much suffering going on, like across the street, you know, literally in your own town, you can find folks that are suffering. And while it seems like the easiest thing to do is just get my own money and try to be a philanthropist, you know, like that there's something in there that feels like that's not it. That's not it. It has to be like what am I doing for the people, which I'm a part of.
I mean, I have to echo what Greg said about his line about, you know, I picked the cotton, I carried it to market, I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing. That is such an incredible peak in Greg's speech as Baldwin. This is part of the debate, and it's one of the lines that I look forward to hearing every time I listen to the show, because I feel like it is such a punch in the face of education. It is explaining to you, the listener, what really happened. And there's a reciprocal part of the show, which is the unpleasant response to that William F. Buckley Jr. has, which is to say, well, my great-grandparents worked too. You know, nothing was ever achieved without some amount of work. And it is this profound misunderstanding of what Baldwin is saying. And it is a profound misunderstanding of the profound history lesson that comes from that statement. And the reason why that awful response also resonates with me is because it sounds so familiar. Yeah. Is because it sounds like the way people now deny structural and systemic racism because they want to say, well, everything's fine now. I mean, even like in the Supreme Court, you know, justices saying like, well, we don't need those laws anymore because everything's fine now. You know, the constant denial that these problems have taken such deep root and they are still poisoning society. And yet people will say like, no, everything's fine, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, whatever. So that is a kind of education I look forward to every time I listen to the show.
Well, and in Hansberry's life too, right? She was an unapologetic Marxist and really lived lean and really was on the ground with people who are activists. And it's interesting that when she wrote Raisin and was shown to the world as a beautiful housewife who wrote a great play, all of that depth, you know, was sort of dismissed. And actually, I think the first ending of Raisin was that they were armed. So the younger family moves to the white neighborhood, shut their doors, and they take up arms. And of course, that wasn't the Broadway production, right? Because that would have been, you know. So I think there's a lot to be said for the isms, right? Like, and why can't we create new ones? Any other questions out there?
Here's a question.
Yes.
I know there's questions.
I keep thinking that in a time that we thought was even more constricted than we are now, there was still a space for a voice and an intellect like Baldwin. And clearly there are people among us now who have that kind of intellect and speak truth, and yet they are so completely vilified. There's really no one I can think of in our public life that is being lifted up and listened to the way that Baldwin was allowed a voice. And I mean, I don't know exactly how to formulate the question, but as people who've been really looking at during that time how Hansberry and Baldwin, despite what was going on, were given that platform and given an ear and given the space to express themselves. Can you reflect a little bit about how we can create more space for, because there are brilliant people among us now with a voice, right?
They were a product of their environment and took the lead and had the difficult conversations. They were not given anything, and I think we have to do the same thing. You know, in 2023, there's still systemic racism. There's still issues with voting. There's still housing discrimination. There are still people that are disenfranchised. We have to take that back, and if we really want to make a change, we have to do something about that. We have to do that.
There are lots of writers and thinkers that are out there. In fact, I'd say that there's too many to name. And I think it speaks to where media is today. Like, there's not one channel to watch There's not one news outlet to read. There's not one like Black political intellectual, you know, conscious voice to listen to. There are many, and I don't think they always agree with each other. And I think people speak to different communities. And, you know, I've heard the same kind of question about, like, you know, well, in the civil rights era, we had leaders. Where's our leader? And I think people now are questioning those hierarchies and like that kind of belief that there needs to be this one voice and this one way, and we all fall in line under this one voice. I mean, you know, there are just so many organizations and folks that are working in tandem. They're great thinkers and writers like Soyika and Ta-Nehisi Coates and, you know, all these great books like the 1619 Project, you know, the new Jim Crow. Like there's a lot of thought out there. It's just, yeah, I don't think it has to be one voice and one particular way. I mean, on the other side, you saw like people rally around Trump and like a handful of slogans. And so maybe there's this idea that there's a power behind kind of dumbing down and centralizing, like, you know, make this like this or whatever. But yeah, you know, but I don't know. I think there's a groundswell that comes from many different directions, and I feel the movement, which I think is what scares the monolith and why they're pulling out all the stops to try to stop this, because things are happening. We are having the conversation that we said we didn't want to have, or some of us said we didn't want to have.
It's always hard to compare a historical view of something when we have that much distance to what's happening right now. And I think that maybe what's incumbent upon us now is to not try to imagine, you know, a sort of glorious historical moment, which we see in these two, you know what I mean? Like, and how inspiring they were and how singular. You know, we don't know, there's no way to write the history of right now. It gets written later. So, and maybe when it does, people will be able to see that there was great clarity in places now that it's harder for us to see. I think what we see more and more right now is just the fearful reaction to progress. And so I think it, you know, it's an interesting question, but it does kind of drive us back to, you know, what we have to do individually.
And it's also like historically obvious every time there is movement, right? There's retrenchment. It just,
yeah.
You can look at it throughout history. Yeah. So freedom comes up a lot in Colbert's book, and our question, we have about like 10 more minutes, is what does freedom mean to each of you, and what is your freedom practice? Because I think Hansberry had one. She was always at work, she was always writing, she was always encountering, she was always debating, and so I guess that's for the three of you. What is freedom to you, and what is your freedom practice?
What's your freedom practice, Greg?
Well, you know what my freedom practice is. But freedom to me in this lifetime would be just to be left alone. Mm-hmm. Not to be bothered. And I'll explain more about that in a second. My freedom practice is every year I go to France for 2 weeks. Why did I go to France for 2 weeks? There's racism in France. But when I go there, I'm not the number one on the racism list. And so it's like I'm taking a vacation from racism. I don't have to worry about, can I go to this restaurant? Who's in this restaurant? Why are they looking at me like this? I can just go there and be and do and experience and live life the way that I was meant to live it. That's my freedom practice.
It's funny that you said to be left alone, because I said that too in my head to myself when I was thinking about these questions. And then I was like, well, how can I define it not in a positive way and not say the absence of something? But I think what I came up with is just like freedom to me is to be able to go in whatever direction I want to go, be that like, Tanzania or like 125th Street or Texarkana or wherever it is I want to go, and unrestricted movement, but also to be fine exactly where I am. Like someone said something recently about like how we understand gravity is not just this force pulling us down, but it's also like the force of the earth kind of rising up to meet us. And so there's actually like something in physics or these laws that there is a kind of like springing up. And to me, I just thought about that and it made me think about just being okay where I am too. So I can go all over the world or the entire world can come to me. And that I have everything I need no matter where I am. That feels toward freedom. And as far as a freedom practice, I think what it looks like is staying open, open to new ideas, open to new possibilities, and then offering that to people around me, not to be stuck in any kind of like hierarchy or institutions, to be able to move laterally and multidimensionally, and to be able to say no to things that don't make sense, just really within my purview, like making choices that feel aligned with what I think is like a decent way to be a person, and then also staying open to new ways to showing up.
That's a complicated question for me because I also grew up in the South and was very lucky to have parents and family who encouraged me or gave me the freedom to want something else, to want to get out. And so for the longest time, my idea of freedom was about intellectual freedom. I wanted to be able to be in a place where, everything that when I got to be 13 or 14 and recognized all these things that I thought were terrible about the rural South, which is where I lived, that freedom would be about getting out of that, would be about getting to a place like New York City or an Ivy League university or someplace where, there was great diversity of people in every respect. And, I found that and I got that. And I don't think about freedom that same way anymore, because I feel like now, and so much rhetoric around that now from white people especially just is nauseating. You don't want to hear about somebody's freedom to, have a gun or not educate their children or whatever, all these awful things that the word gets attached to so often now rhetorically. So I don't think about it. If I had to answer what my practice was that way, it's really just about constantly reminding myself of the freedom I already have. Not about something aspirational, but about humility and about consciousness and understanding of all the things that have already been given to me, all the freedoms I already have, and not ever letting myself think that I am somehow underprivileged or that I somehow need more than I have, because that isn't going to help the world in any way. It's not going to help me either. So I don't, it's a complicated thing to think about, but it takes me there, just to humility.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for answering the question, because you could have skipped it. Like, you know what? Number 5, can we not? Anybody else out there? Oh, great. Good. Yay.
Thank you. Is this on? Yeah, thank you so much for this really interesting conversation. So, Hansberry and Baldwin both use their art and their voice in service of political engagement and freedom struggles. And I'm just wondering if the two of you as artists in playing these roles came to learn or think anything different about your own art and either politics or freedom.
Go. You speak.
Yeah, I feel I'm a braver artist now. Throughout all the research that I did to play James Baldwin, and I saw his inner strength and his struggles and his background and how he got to where he got, I feel a little less poor me. And a lot more like, I've only have such a short time left on this earth. I'm going to try to do the best I can as an artist to make a difference about things that really matter. So,
what I was just going to say about Lorraine Hansberry is through this project, I learned more about her identity as a queer woman, which I think growing up with Lorraine Hansberry and loving, A Raisin in the Sun and like dying to play Benita and like, still please someone can I play Benita? I was not aware of that part of her. And, part of this research also was like looking into her queer literature under a pseudonym. And, it's just kind of opened me up into just how queerness and Blackness intersect, and just how comforting that knowledge feels and how interesting that feels, especially as Lorraine was someone who was married to a white man and, like you said, thought of as, in certain contexts, as this nice little straight housewife, but was living in Croton as a lesbian, and toward what would be the end of her life. And so, I've just been thinking about how those identities rhyme, and and in a very interesting way, like how a lot of the tension for white folks and well-meaning white folks is this decentering yourself and not being comfortable, and is the worst part of your day that you're just wrong? Is that really it? And seeing that as someone who has an affinity for queerness, but does not necessarily lead in identifying myself as a part of the active queer community, just being in queer spaces, I go like, it's not that hard. It's not that hard to like be wrong and, you know, fix it, or just sit down and be quiet and get out of the way for like 7 minutes. Like, can you just have it not be about like, well, I tried and I did all this work and I'm still wrong? Well, I guess I just can't say anything. You know, it's just like, well, don't say anything then. And so it's okay. Just sit and just be around folks, you know, if they feel like being around you, you know, like, so I guess part of the being investigated in this part of Lorraine has just kind of like helped me to sit comfortably with, just being more open.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
I want to thank all of you for such a rich, amazing conversation. One of the things that that really struck me as true was something was mentioned about the white school really being for the whites, by the whites, and about the whites, and not really being sometimes accommodating educationally for blacks and Hispanics, and I said to myself, yes, that's true, but it's hard for me to say exactly how and why and how that can be brought to light and turned around. It's also was said that education is helpful, which is also true. But those two contradict each other, and so there's something there. How can we shine a light on making the white school what it could be? Is
the Lycée Français, and he's learning French history, and there's a lot of stuff that he's coming home with that is challenging in a similar way to me, of, you know, how he's being taught in certain classes about like dark Africa and all the poverty, and it's like, well, where do you think these European nations got their wealth from? This very resource-rich nation. And there was a quote floating around on social media during Black History Month that was like, slavery is white history. It's not Black history. So I think when we really investigate what education is, like I was saying, for me, intelligence is not like, have you read these particular great white dead men that this particular institution has decided are the great men to have read. I had a sister who went to Thailand on a Fulbright to teach African American literature as American literature. And so these people who were new to English were taught Amiri Baraka, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston as the English language. So I feel like it's not contradictory. I feel like we all need to know the origins of this country, and that needs to be taught. And I think we all need to know about the contributions of who gets called American and what that is. And I think that's beneficial to everyone who's on this soil.
Thanks for a great panel. Are you planning to collaborate again? And do you have anything in development? And if not, you know, what would be the obstacles in your way, and how could you overcome them? Because we'd love to see more.
We're a company that very much values the kind of community that we create around our work. And so, you know, Greg and April have both worked on many shows with us, and I'm sure we'll work on many more to come. You know, this is not an official plan of ours, but you know, the way projects come about sometimes is like one show will sort of suggest another one, and this not very long scene at the end of Baldwin and Buckley at Cambridge between these two people, as we worked on it, I kept thinking, this could really be its own thing. And I still think about that. I still think about that. The boring answer to the question is that we're working on an adaptation of James Joyce's Ulysses right now, which April worked on briefly when we first started to work on it and made a great contribution then, but is just too big and famous now to continue with. So that's the next thing. I mean, we love, you know, tough problems to solve, you know, I think that I'm serious when I say that, like, the scene at the end of Baldwin and Buckley is material, tons of material for more work.
Mm-hmm. And Baldwin Buckley is going to France.
Yeah, oh yeah, and we are, and Baldwin and Buckley at Cambridge continues to perform. We are going to Avignon in July, which is exciting, and I think great to take that show to France, which was an important place to James Baldwin.
And Greg.
More importantly, a very important place
to Greg. Sorry.
And we'll also do the show in Berkeley next year as well. So and hopefully more than that. I mean, we'd like to do it in New York again. We felt like we got a little shortchanged on our run at the public, and we, you know, that's the other thing about having a company like this, is that it's always our ambition for each show to live on with the people who made it. So this will continue to be a priority. This show will, going forward.
Well, it's that time.
One more.
We have another.
She'll catch you later.
One more.
I saw the production
Oh.
at the public, and the bravery at the end of the show was phenomenal, of the two of you being who you are.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, I'm an elevator repair service groupie. I see everything you've done, and I always thought about how white the company was, and that bothered me, actually. And I'm curious about the fact that you are the artistic director. Have you shifted roles? I mean, I know you all work collaboratively, but what about...
It's all him. I don't want that job.
Well, we don't, I mean, I have always had that role and continue to, and I think of it as sort of, in part, a sort of necessary sort of structural consistency that I hope allows for a lot of freedom inside it. You know, it was my privilege and pleasure to be able to hand off the authoring of the concept of this show to Greg, and a lot of times it does happen that way, where I'm just there to facilitate the creative input of other people, and so you know, happy to keep watching us. You'll be less frustrated by how long we are.
I'm sorry. One more. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, and it'll be very quick, and it's a perfect closer, I think. If you could give, from the words that they had, again, from their quotes and their thoughts, if you could give marching orders to everyone listening right now, from their words or from what you've gleaned from your study of them, just how, like, Buckley ordered a race war, basically, the way that some of our representatives are in contrast to that, what would you give us as marching orders for the people that are listening right now?
Become an American radical.
Become an American radical.
We'll end this the way we end our show then.
Oh, that's
We're done.
Yeah.
We're done.